the soft skill topic of the night. I've been coming to a lot of the meetups just as a little bit of background. When I became a Microsoft MVP to support other local MVPs, not because I'm a developer. So we were trying to figure out what I could present, and I thought this was a good idea. So branding you is it's my journey through, really mostly through self-employment, and when I started out and I thought I needed to brand my company and make that the focus, and then changed course to more of branding myself. So a little bit of background, I'm born and raised in KW and never even left for university, went to Laurier, got my Bachelor of Business Administration. I got a Certified General Accountant designation. It took me about 13 years after graduating university to get that, because it took me a little while to figure out, like, going in university I thought accounting was what I wanted to do. Halfway through you realize how boring as shit accounting really is. After university you realize that's my aptitude, so I started taking the CGA. They added more letters, all the accounting bodies merged a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, so I have more alphabets, letters behind my name. And I was awarded a Microsoft MVP in October 2016 in business solutions. So that is primarily the business applications, so CRM and the Dynamics suite of products. So I happen to be using Dynamics GP and advocating for that, but there's Exapta, Nav, now Dynamics 365, a whole bunch of stuff. You can't just say Dynamics anymore. I'm a living, breathing, conscious of that light, by the way. Every time I come here, I think the light's going to fall on someone's head. I'm a living, breathing example of, you may walk out of university not having a clue what you're good at or what you like to do. It took me 8 years before I found my niche, what I liked, what I enjoyed, and what I was good at. So first 2 years out of school, worked at Future Shop, and I did so well I had trouble paying my $395 a month rent. So that didn't last very long, although 2 years was pretty good, but I really sucked. I was really helpful, I just couldn't close. I wasn't a salesperson. I started working for my uncle. He's a print broker in town. He doesn't print, he's not a printer, but he literally is broker for different kinds of print jobs. So I was doing bookkeeping for him so that he could free himself up. He was doing it all himself. Morphed into a bit of a full-time role for about 4 years where I was doing some desktop publishing, and it's really where I got a good eye for design and colors and fonts, as much as I'm using great plain fonts in my slide deck. Just having a lot of fun with it. After leaving there, I went to Toronto and I got a job at 724 Solutions. Some of you may have heard of them. That was right around the dot-com era where we went up and down in equal and opposite speeds. I was the 75th employee, and 6 months later we had 750. At one point I'm doing payroll for Belgium, Japan, I don't know, I lost track. Thankfully I didn't have to do it, I just had to coordinate it all. I'm going to forward one thing. The accounting role was really pivotal because, actually, working for my uncle was the pivotal moment. I turned 30, he pulled me aside, we went for a beer one night, and he said, you know what, you're going to blink and you're going to be 40 and you're going to be sitting at the same damn desk doing the same damn job and you're better than this. So basically he was firing me by giving me a really long rope so I had time to find another job. That's when I got to 724 Solutions, and on my 4th day at 724 Solutions, I sat down with my managers and they said, we're implementing a product called Great Plains. You're in charge. And Great Plains was bought by Microsoft. By the time I left 724, Microsoft had bought Great Plains. It's now Dynamics GP is the brand name. That's what I did consulting for after leaving 724. That's what my MVP is. So my uncle firing me and getting that job is really the best thing that happened to me in my career. So really where this all branding stuff fits in is when I left, I worked for consulting firms for about 8 years, worked for Deloitte, worked for BDO, self-employed for, this would have been 9 years. I'm now back to a customer. I started working for a customer, Energy Plus, the local hydro in Cambridge. I started working for them in January. I had been working at their place as a consultant for 2.5 years before that. They had amalgamated with another local utility south of us. And the branding piece is really about self-employment. This is kind of where the story comes in. So after all that, I'm finally getting to the point of the branding. When I started my business, so it was Kuntz Consulting, was my name. I had a corporate Twitter. My Twitter was @Kuntz Consulting. my website, my blog, I had a Facebook corporate page. I was looking at all the other consulting firms. It didn't matter that they had 100 or 200 staff, and I was one. I was looking at them thinking, well, that's what the webpage should look like, and that's what I should have a corporate Twitter, and I should have a corporate Facebook, and I should do this because I'm going to take over the world someday. And that's kind of where I started, and it worked to a certain extent. First webpage, obviously hard to read. The Wayback Machine is pretty amazing and scary at the same time. So I found this, and the slider still works. I was sitting there watching, and I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. I had a services page, I had a products page, I had big consulting firm terms on my website. I had about us, contact us. I'm one person, right? I didn't really understand. When I eventually started to rebrand Still Business, this is long before I did the personal bit, went to WordPress. The first guy I had do my website, he introduced green as kind of the accent color, and I really liked that, so I kept that. And even now my personal stuff, my slide deck is obviously blue with the green. I kept the same branding throughout because I liked it and people were kind of associating with me. So somewhere around 2015, 2016, some realizations hit me, and it had nothing to do with Trump being elected. I wasn't getting credit for my content. So there was a number of people in our community that are really good about sharing the blogs, but they'd be sharing them saying, Kuntz Consulting wrote a great thing about Dynamics GP, or Kuntz Consulting has a nice blog this week. And I started to get pissed off. So it was working exactly as I had envisioned it 6-7 years earlier, where I wanted the company name to be the brand and I wanted to build my company name. But then I was getting annoyed that I wasn't getting the credit. Like, it wasn't my name out there. So that was kind of one thing. 7 years in, I realized I'm not hiring anybody. I'm never going to build a firm. I like what I'm doing. I don't want to have to go sell to feed somebody else's family. I'd rather do the work. I enjoy the work. And there was a bunch of different things that I found kind of annoying on the corporate versus personal branding. Some of it was LinkedIn. Like, I'd start seeing people on LinkedIn, you build a profile for yourself. You can have a corporate page, but I started seeing people connected to companies, and you don't connect to companies, you follow companies. But people were creating personal LinkedIn pages with a company name and weird stuff, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But the real one was kind of the opposite of my scenario. At this point, my Twitter handle was still my business. We were working with a guy, the company I'm working for now. We hired him. They hired him before my time to do some work. We were upgrading. We couldn't get his code working. We had to get him back. He was famous for, yeah, I'll get back to you tomorrow, and 3 days later you'd follow up and he's like, oh, I'll get back to you tomorrow, and rinse, lather, repeat. But I'd be at lunch and I'd be checking my Twitter feed and I'd see him tweeting a whole bunch of times. I'm like, you asshole. Excuse the language. I should have thought of different words. Yeah, you started it. You're tweeting all day and not answering my email, and you're not helping, like, you're not giving me any sense of trying to help us out. So what was interesting is his Twitter handle was like Bob_my company, So he was using a personal Twitter handle. He was actually hiring a social media firm to do his tweets for him, which I think worked backwards, because any customers that were annoyed with him would be looking at this and looking at lack of responses or lack of calls back and going, this guy has his priorities backwards. Meanwhile, it's innocent. He should have been branding those as his company. So I was kind of at the opposite spot. So I started to make some changes. First thing I did is I ditched the Facebook corporate page. I never ended up using it. I had the colors and the logo and all that kind of stuff, but I think I struggled with, for me, Facebook is personal, it's friends. I have some clients on there, but I didn't want to spam family and friends with my blog posts, who they don't give a damn, as much as my mom and dad might be the only readers of my blog some days. I got rid of that because it was doing nothing. I renamed my Twitter handle. So anybody that's on Twitter, you may or may not know, you can change your Twitter handle at any time, assuming nobody has the handle that you want. You can just rename it. You don't have to create a new profile. So it was great because I changed it from @Kuntz Consulting to @JenKuntzGP, which was more in line with what I'm doing, and you don't lose any followers. You don't really have to worry about losing what you've built up. It's seamless. So in that time frame, so the Twitter handle was somewhere in early 2016, I changed the Twitter handle. In June of 2016, I got the nomination for the MVP award, which was coincidental. Those two things weren't related. In October, I got my MVP award. Sometime after that is when I started thinking about maybe having a personal website instead of a business website. So I was blogging, and the blog content was me. People were still going, Kuntz Consulting is writing up some nice stuff. So I was still having that little irritation factor with it's not coming back to me. And I think part of what drove this for me is being an MVP, everything's about you. Like, it's what are you doing for us lately? How many hits do you have? And everything is so you, not your company, that I wanted to make it crystal clear that it was me. So I registered a domain, jenkuntz.ca. I moved my blog over after a few months. Once I saw that searching was going to the new site, not the old site, I actually deleted WordPress off my old site entirely and ditched the blog. So all the content I ever wrote was on my new site, which worked out nicely. So just some random things about how I branded the blog, which can probably translate to other things if you have other similar things you want to try and brand about yourself. So I found a niche in MySpace and Dynamics GP. When I started, there weren't any Canadians blogging about Dynamics GP. There was a good community, but it was all American or UK or Australia were the big people in my community. So my niche was Canadian payroll, HST, stuff that's really boring. But I just had to pepper enough of that in so that I was getting known as that's the Canadian person, and everybody kind of knows that. I started reaching out to others. Everybody that has a blog at some point has a blog list, a blog roll, blogs I follow, something like that. So I started reaching out to everybody in my community and saying, hey, I'm new, if you don't mind, check out my blog, see if you think I'm worthy, maybe do you mind adding it to your site? And some people did, some people didn't. I looked for things to syndicate, so I was lucky that the Dynamics community, Microsoft has a site that they own that they syndicate blogs. So looking into that, I think they had to wait a few months to see that I had a repeatable content or regular content, that I wasn't writing a blog a year. And then I could get syndicated. I use social media a lot, especially for promoting the blog. So every time I write a post, I'm posting to Twitter, posting to LinkedIn, because I find those audiences are quite different. I'll do a lot of follow-ups with there, but I figure if people aren't following my website directly, but they see me on Twitter or they see it on LinkedIn, they might still get the content, which is what's important. And everywhere I go, every forum I'm on, all my social media profiles, I put my blog or my Twitter or my LinkedIn in my profile somewhere or in my signature. So every time I post, even if I'm asking a question, I'm not going, hey, check out my blog. It's just in there at the bottom of whatever you're writing. So everybody that sees that or clicks on your profile link and looks around, they see it. So really it's all just about getting noticed. A couple other quick tips. This one I learned from Scott Hanselman at MVP Summit this year. One of the soft skills sessions, he talked about being consistent with your brand in the sense of if you're on a bunch of different forums or GitHub or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, use the same profile picture. Or use the same avatar. I shouldn't say it doesn't necessarily have to be a picture. Be consistent so people start recognizing you. Try to use the same handle, profile, ID across those if you can. Sometimes you don't have a choice. If you're on something that's fairly popular, your favorite handle might not be available. But trying to be consistent, people will start to recognize you, and it's a consistent brand throughout whatever you do. I'd say don't be afraid to tell your story. So I changed my Twitter handle, and I wrote a blog about it, and I wrote a blog about why. And when I got my MVP, I wrote a blog, and when I moved my website, I got a blog. You get the idea. Really, for me, branding myself was as much letting people in to understand a little bit more about me outside of here's how to enter a accounts receivable transaction, which only has a limited audience. So sometimes the personal story just it reaches people in a different way and gives them an opportunity to reach out or just follow, and it attracts a different kind of user sometimes. I find my blogs about that often are way more popular than how to enter a cash receipt, oddly enough. So this one I should have put a question mark at the end. I stuck this in here and then I started to change my mind when I was practicing my presentation. I'm cautiously recommending identifying yourself, but the caveat is I know there's a very real problem online with bullying and harassment, particularly with females, not always with females, but generally they tend to be targets. So identifying yourself is with a caveat. What I find sometimes, though, in the era of fake news and so-called fake news is you don't know if something's real or not, if there's actually a real person behind something. So sometimes, even if the name on the, like I think of Twitter, but if the ID, if your Twitter handle and your Twitter name aren't your name, that's fine. Maybe somewhere in your profile put something, even if you just put your initial and your last name or something. Sometimes it's helpful just to identify yourself so people might know, appreciate that there's a real person behind the account, or real people managing the account. That was really it for me. I think as an MVP, I find that more important. I stumble across random accounts at times where people might follow me and I go and look, the names, I don't recognize the name because it's a generic handle, a generic name. The profile says I'm an MVP, but it doesn't tell you who they are. I'm like, just one of those things that I think you could benefit from getting a little more exposure if someone connects the dots, even if you maybe don't identify your gender by being completely transparent. So that part's probably more my opinion than anything else. Questions? Oh my God, I actually did it in less than 22 minutes. I've been practicing this, and the first time I couldn't even get it under 30. Obviously, I was talking too slowly. Questions? No? Question?
In the way of which way to brand, when would you give the advice to say go with a more corporate brand versus when you do more personal? Is it when you get to a certain size, you got 5 employees, you got 10 employees? Now we're talking about corporate versus personal.
Yeah, did everybody hear the question? So it's kind of when would you go more corporate versus personal branding? Like at what point would you switch from one angle or the other? Probably a little bit of size and intent. When I first started my company, I wasn't sure. I honestly thought I might build a consulting firm and eventually hire, and I wasn't sure. So I kind of went down what seemed familiar. Getting an MVP award in anything individual was furthest thing from my mind. Like, didn't even cross my mind just to start my own website. I think once you start hiring people and you have a bit of a presence and you want to market that separately from maybe you being a key employee or the owner of the business, I think that's where you might start to be branding both in different ways. One is just helping promote my company, and other is branding the company, if that helps. That would be how I do it. All right, thank you.